Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about some more of our sentence types. Last week we talked about two types of sentences, our simple sentences, which just have one independent clause, and our compound sentences, which are two independent clause. But that doesn't mention any sentences with dependent clause. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So our first type of sentence is a complex sentences. And these are sentences with one independent clause and one or more dependent clause. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. Here's our first one. Because it was raining, the ultimate frisbee game was canceled. So here I have a dependent clause because it was raining. It starts with one of my cliffhanger woobus words, because. All right, and then I have an independent clause that could stand alone. The ultimate frisbee game was canceled. Okay, so dependent clause plus independent clause. All right, the sky was dark as the storm approached. Same thing. I've got an woobus cliffhanger word right here, as. So that's as the storm approached is a dependent clause. And then the sky was dark is my independent clause. Last one, I was exhausted because I stayed up all night studying. I was exhausted, independent, because I stayed up all night studying is dependent since it starts with my word because. All right, so these are complex sentences. We've got an independent clause and a dependent clause. Now, if we wanted to add more dependent clauses on, that's fine. That would still make it a complex sentence. So I could say, I was exhausted because I stayed up all night studying because I had midterms the next day. We still got a complex sentence. It's just an independent clause plus two dependent clauses. All right, now, last type of sentence. There are only 4 sentence types. This is the very last one, and that is compound complex. And just like it sounds, you just kind of squish together a compound sentence with a complex sentence. So it contains 2 or more independent clauses and at least 1 dependent clause. So you're basically just sticking a dependent clause onto a compound sentence. So let's look at our examples. When the game was over, Seth took the ball and Larry threw it into the stands. So I start with a dependent clause, when the game was over. All right, then I have an independent clause, Seth took the ball, my comma fanboys, and then another independent clause, Larry threw it into the stands. Okay, so 2 independent clauses plus a dependent clause. That's a compound complex sentence. All right, let's look at my next one. Because I was so tired, another dependent clause. I went home, an independent clause. Then we got our comma fanboys. And then I went straight to bed, another independent clause. So 1 dependent plus 2 independents, compound complex. All right, last one, the dog was sick. That's independent. Then we got a comma fanboys. I took her to the vet is another independent. And then we have a dependent at the end, when I got off work. Okay, now let's take a look at our little practice down here. So it says in each of these complex sentences, underline the independent clause once and the dependent clause twice. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing, okay, with my compound complex down here. So let's start with our complex. I'm going to do the first one with you. Because it was cold outside, I brought a jacket to the game with me. So remember, dependent and independent clauses will both have subjects and verbs, but our dependent clauses will start with one of those woobus or cliffhanger words like because, as, until, since, okay? And they can't stand alone. An independent clause, you could take it out and it could stand alone as its own sentence. So let's look here. I see one of those cliffhanger words right here with because. So I know this is going to be dependent. Let's underline that twice. And then I brought a jacket to the game with me. That could stand alone as its own sentence, so that's independent. And I know each of these is complex, all right? So I know I'm looking for an independent and a dependent. All right, I want you to go ahead and do 2 through 3 for me on your own really quickly. All right, hopefully we had a chance to get numbers 2 and 3 done. Let's go ahead and check them. So you should have said, as I stood outside watching the game, was dependent. and I noticed someone walking up the stairs. We'll see walking up the stairs holding a lot of sodas should have been independent. Okay, it could stand alone. I could just say to you, I noticed someone walking up the stairs holding a lot of sodas. And that's fine. That could stand alone. But if I said, as I stood outside watching the game, you're like, what happened as you stood outside? Okay. All right, let's do number 3. When they were next to me, that's a dependent clause. All right, and then our independent, they tripped and spilled soda all over my jacket. All right, now let's take a look at our next one. This time, they're all going to be compound complex sentences, like it says right there. Okay, so you're looking for at least 2 independent clauses, at least 1 dependent clause. All right, so let's do number 1 together. If you have a solution, let us know, and we will try it. So I see one of those cliffhanger words, if. So I know that's going to be my dependent clause. All right, then I got an independent clause, let us know. Then a comma and, combining my next independent clause, we will try it. All right, so go ahead and do 2 and 3 for me on your own. All right, hopefully you've gotten a chance to finish that. So let's take a look at these. You should have said, because Trudy had studied previous chess matches as a dependent clause. My lines got a little bit messed up there, but that is dependent. And then she was able to play brilliantly as independent. She beat Sid soundly as another independent. Number 3, when we get to the park, it's dependent. Bill will put up the tent. Carl will start the fire, is also independent. All right, now, at this last one, you're going to identify each of the following as simple. You can just write an S. Compound, a C. Complex, CX, or compound complex, CCX. So just write each of those abbreviations next to them. Keep an eye out for subject-verb pairs. That's how you can find how many clauses you have, okay? And keep an eye out for those cliffhanger words, all right, that let you know when something is a dependent clause. We'll check this independent practice first thing tomorrow and do a little bit more practice to make sure we've all got this. All right, have a great night.